Hey everyone, this is Josh. For my second type of text, I went with Tabletop RPG core rulebooks. So this is something I got into a couple years ago. I had a band director introduce me to tabletop role playing via Pathfinder, which he was running for students at the high school where I used to work. And before that, I had never played any kinds of RPGs, at least tabletop RPGs. So I'd, of course, heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but I really had no idea what it was about, what it was all about. And after playing just one game, I was instantly hooked with the idea of role playing and, you know, jumping into the skin of another character and role playing as someone other than myself in another world. It was a lot of fun. So for the past 3 years, I think I've been exploring RPGs outside of Pathfinder. And so today we're going to look at these 5 rule books. And these are rule books I got through a website called Drive Through RPG, where you just pay a lower price for the PDF. I do have a couple of these physical copies, so I could actually keep these in my classroom library, but it seemed more efficient to do this video through Screencastify instead of trying to flip through all of the physical books under my camera. So, what I first notice about these, of course, are the images. We'll get to that, but I first want to talk about the titles and how the names of the titles tell you what the game is all about. So, obviously, with the One Ring, um, we know that this is going to be set in Tolkien's Middle Earth, just by that name alone. Call of Cthulhu, I think this one's a little more esoteric, but if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, then you've probably heard Cthulhu before, and you know that when you hear this name, that it's going to be taking place within his mythos. Of course, Edge of the Empire has Star Wars right there, front and center. So, of course, we know that this game is going to take place in the Star Wars universe. Starfinder, now this one's a little different because this might not be a world you've ever heard of. And of course, that's because this is a pretty much brand new game with a brand new universe. But we know with the name Starfinder that this is probably going to be a sci-fi game that involves space in some way. Lastly, we have Pendragon. The full title is King Arthur Pendragon. But when hearing this name, of course, you know that this is probably going to take place in King Arthur's kingdom and will probably have something to do with knighthood. So, beyond that, the fonts themselves can tell you what the game is about. The One Ring title font uses a Celtic sort of script that evokes the fantasy setting. Edge of the Empire uses the Star Wars movie font. So this is the font that appears in all of the cinematic portrayals of Star Wars. Starfinder does have that 80s sci-fi kind of theme with the font, especially down here. This reminds me of all of those 80s sci-fi novels that you might find all over a used bookstore with the all caps. And then Pendragon, like the One Ring, has I guess a medieval looking font. This is probably something closer to like a script from a monk who's copying down something in Latin. And then lastly, Call of Cthulhu. I'm not sure how I would describe this script, but I think maybe there's some kind of Egyptian mood going on here, especially with the sort of snake looking C and U. So perhaps this evokes some kind of atmosphere of, mysticism and magic and the ancient world. So beyond the fonts, the colors themselves um, certainly tell you about the mood of the game. Starfinder is kind of like the Wild West in space. There are lots of bright neon colors, and this reminds me of perhaps like the Blade Runner series. The One Ring has that leathery kind of color palette with the browns, the different hues and tones of brown. And Star Wars Edge of the Empire. This one's minimalist, and it might be because this is the quick start rule set. So I think this is actually free. So if you're going to buy the full book, perhaps there's a little more color. So the Empire, we know the stormtroopers are white. So maybe they went with white to evoke that mood. Beyond this, what have I not looked at? Call of Cthulhu, there's a lot of dark colors in here, especially the dark purple. And I think that communicates the otherworldliness in this game. Lastly, Pendragon. These are very like soft, muted earth tones with the reds and browns here. And I think a lot of this game takes place in nature. And so that's probably why they went with these kinds of colors. And then I'm not sure if these are like stones or trees or what's going on in the back. So past the colors, I think we can look at the images. Something that I noticed about all of these covers is that they all have some kind of alien race or some kind of preternatural creature. So in Starfinder, we can see anthropomorphized rats here. Definitely some other kinds of races. Here's a reptilian-looking creature in the One Ring. Down here, obviously, these are some orcs. Edge of Empire has a Wookiee, and we all know that's Chewie. And then King Arthur Pendragon has this great boar, and we know that boars don't actually reach this size, so there's some kind of magic or supernatural at work here. And then in Call of Cthulhu, I am guessing this is supposed to be Cthulhu himself, and obviously this is an otherworldly creature as well. And this is the biggest creature that we can see because here is a ship down here. So this creature is massive. Beyond that, also, all but one of these depict some kind of weapon. So in King Arthur Pendragon, this warrior is holding a spear. Here we have several different kinds of space age weapons going on. The One Ring, we've got some swords and axes and a spear. In Edge of the Empire, we obviously have a blaster. Can't remember the name of Chewie's weapon. And then this is important because in Call of Cthulhu, there are no weapons depicted. And I think that tells you a little bit about the game because in this RPG, you are helpless against creatures and gods of Lovecraft's mythos. And actually, in this game, dying is part of the game, and it's expected. Maybe not every session, but it's inevitable that your character is either going to die or go insane. So now we can move past the cover